Today's guest, Rick Alessandri, is currently the Managing Director for Media and Sports Tech for Turnkey ZRG, an executive search firm, and he's got 30-plus years in the industry. Having started his career as GM of Sports Ticker, which ESPN acquired, and then working his way up at ESPN over a 20-year career, ultimately becoming the Chief of Staff to ESPN President George Bodenheimer. And, in addition to, Senior Vice President of ESPN Enterprises and the CXO of the X Games. Rick's ESPN Enterprise team was responsible for all of ESPN's brand extensions from X Games and ESPN branded merchandise, ESPN golf schools, and the ESPN Zone restaurant. No small body of work in that part of the CV. Rick also served 7 years as the Executive Vice President of Enterprise Development at Univision before joining Turnkey ZRG in October of 2018, specifically to help launch and grow Turnkey's media and tech search practice. He's led searches for DAZN's Chief Communications Officer and Vice President of Media, Major League Rugby's Commissioner, U.S. Soccer's CEO, FanDuel TV's Executive Producer. He found the CEO for Anthem Sports Entertainment and also the CEO for C360 Technologies, among many others. With the ever-increasing convergence between media, sports, content, and tech, his 30-year hands-on management career and vast network of relationships well positions Turnkey ZRG to serve this disruptive space. Morning, Rick. Can't thank you enough for joining us today on the Best Boss Ever podcast.
Thanks, Carl. This is awesome. Listen to several of your podcasts. I'm honored to be included in the mix of folks that you've brought to the table here.
Well, listen, we're more than pleased to have you and appreciate your willingness to spend the time. So as we start every episode, same question for you. You've got a really strong body of work over the better part of 30 years. So who, and maybe more than one who, was the best boss or mentor or influencer you ever had? And what of those learnings from that individual or individuals have you taken away and used those today in your management style and approach to business?
This is like picking one of my 3 children as my best and most favorite child. You're right. I've had an amazing career, an incredible career, and it's been highlighted with some amazing bosses. One of my first bosses was Peter Bavasi. Peter was the son of Buzzy Bavasi, GM of the Brooklyn Dodgers, Los Angeles Dodgers. Came from a baseball family. He came over to Sports Ticker when Telerate Systems bought us back in 1987, and I was a 25-year-old executive at the time, just getting my start. And Peter really was probably the most influential boss of my career. But then to go on and work for folks like Ed Durso, who spent a long career at Major League Baseball before coming over to ESPN, Dick Glover, George Bodenheimer, you mentioned, obviously many, many lessons from George over the years, a man of tremendous integrity and work ethic. And then going to Univision, where I worked for 3 incredible bosses in Randy Falco, Kevin Conroy, Tanya O'Connor, and then ultimately landing in 2018, reinventing myself as an executive recruiter. So when I think of my best boss ever, it's really hard. I've taken away bits and pieces from all. I think Peter, I've always looked at Peter as almost like a second father, quite frankly. Where I was in my career, early days, I was very ambitious at the time at Sports Ticker. I was doing everything. And interestingly enough, when Telerate bought us, there was a scout who came out, somebody who came and evaluated the business, looked at all the pieces, and then went back and reported to Peter before Peter joined and gave him a lay of the land. And I was the sales and marketing guy at the time, and I didn't have any resources to grow the company. And our sales were pretty crappy, quite frankly. And Peter's first thought was, we're going to fire that 25-year-old guy. We got to get some senior leadership in here. And the guy who was the scout, Bill Duncan, unfortunately passed away several years ago. Bill told Peter, don't fire this guy. Give him a chance. Meet him. You're going to see the passion he has. He's working 2 full-time jobs. Just give him a chance. And Peter did. Gave me a chance. I was halfway through my MBA program, and I was leaving one night for work, and Peter asked me where I was going. And I told him I was going to Pace University, trying to get my MBA at night, trying to work during the day. And he said, don't do that. You give me 80 hours a week, I'll give you your best MBA ever. And the next week I dropped out. And
Wow.
Peter did. Peter gave me a life MBA and taught me so many incredible lessons. And I think the lesson that to this day resonates with me the most is don't get too famous. Peter was never about ego. He was never about kind of, being in the spotlight. It was always about being behind the scenes, leading from the front, building the camaraderie and trust in your employees and leadership. And that's what I took from him. And throughout my career, I think I've tried to live that, not only in my career, but in my life, is not to get too famous and just remember where I came from. I'm, just a kid from Yonkers that happened to hit it nice with some really amazing jobs in my career. And I've had 3 different components to my career: the sports career with Sports Ticker and ESPN, to becoming an executive in, Spanish, media company, which no habla español here, to now becoming an executive recruiter. So I've had to reinvent myself a couple of times. And every time I do that, I always take that lesson that Peter gave me and just basically check my ego at the door and learn as much as I can, be a sponge, be inquisitive, always be curious. And I do that to this day. At the same time, someone like George Bodenheimer taught me that you can do all these things, be a great boss, be a great leader, be humble, and do it with integrity, do it with compassion, do it without yelling. I saw George lead, for many years at ESPN. I never, ever heard him raise his voice once. He was such an incredible and compassionate leader. Anybody you talk to about George Bodenheimer will be consistent with their praise for him to this day. He still remains an important part of my life and was an amazing leader. And then, Len Perner today has, he took a chance on me back in 2018. Yes, I hired many people. Yes, I had to deal with personnel issues, but this was a new career for me. And Len told me, be patient. It's going to take time. And there were many times during the first 18 months where I was like, this may not be for me. I may need to go back to a corporate job. And Len said, no, be patient. It'll happen. It'll happen. And without that encouragement from Len Perner, Diana Buccino, I might have been on doing something else at this point. But now it's 7.5 years later, and I've settled into this role. And I have Len Perner really to thank for that with his encouragement and support.
Wow, those are three great stories and takeaways. And I think that, my perspective, the common thread there is your willingness to learn, your curiosity, your approach and passion to the integrity of the job, a humble approach to the job. But at the end of the day, it's essentially work your butt off, doing all the right things, and whatever fame may or may not come, whatever recognition may or may not come, is always going to be grounded in the body and quality and excellence of the work that you do every day.
Yeah, listen, you have to deliver. We work in sports. Many of us work in sports, and we all keep score, right? And in business, you have to keep score. You have to put wins on the board. Otherwise, you don't advance. And it's true. You can do it, though, in a way that does maintain your integrity and do it in a way that has, compassion and empathy to the folks you work with, above and below. I think that's the thing that I saw. Listen, I've always been an advocate for – I've learned just as many important lessons from my best bosses as I have from my worst bosses. I learned what I didn't want to be from many of the bosses that I had over that almost 35-year career now, that I did not want to take from them. And that any time that I saw that in another leader, I was compelled to try to fix it, or at least be a sounding board for someone, because those are the things that really can, destroy an organization, is really bad leadership. And, again, blessed with great bosses, but there were a couple that did not fit that bill, and I did learn from them as well, and it helped me in my career, no question.
Yeah, and I think that's 100% true with all of us. You learn what not to do from the less than excellent or best bosses, and learning what not to do and what doesn't work. And as you observe, to your point, poor or bad leadership, cratering an organization is not a fun thing to watch, especially if you're a part of it. So that's kind of a little bit of an uphill swim in that context, but I'm glad you brought that up because it's a two-sided coin, and both sides of the coin are super important. So you and I were talking off camera. The executive search business is, I'm going to call it a black box. It's mercurial. We've all talked to recruiters over our careers. Some of us have had the good fortune. I had the good fortune of one time being recruited successfully for what turned out to be a really landmark role and position in my career, which led to many other things, because that's where I found my best boss, was back in the day at Universal Studios. That said, in the space that you're in, Rick, where, linear media, which was really what was the rule of the day when you were at ESPN, right? It was cable subscribers, it was distribution, it was literally linear. There wasn't streaming, there wasn't audience fragmentation. The only place you could get ESPN content was on ESPN. No longer true. But in fact, so no longer true that it almost, you have to have an engineering degree to figure out the space. It's so disruptive. So the question is really twofold. How you interact with the firms that hire you to go into the marketplace, retain Turnkey to go into the marketplace to find a CEO or an EVP or a CXO executive that's going to come in and make a difference in this incredibly disruptive space. So speak to two things, if you would. One, the magic or the mystery around the executive recruiting business and how you work with and perhaps guide those firms that are retaining you to go find the next great executive. And secondly, how you deal and how your clients are dealing with this continuing pace of the rapid fragmentation in the media world.
Yeah, listen, there were many years during my career where I was leading, helping to lead organizations. Recruiters would call, and I would basically not take calls. It wasn't until I took a call in 2011 that changed my life to go to Univision and ultimately landed at Turnkey in 2018. But when we go out, one of the things that I think differentiates Turnkey from many other firms is we really build relationships with both our clients but also candidates. We're not recruiting once we land a particular assignment. We're recruiting 365 days a year in terms of understanding who's out there in the marketplace, who are the up-and-comers, who's looking to leave, who's looking to do something new, what are the stories out there. So we're always paying attention to the candidate side of the business and building relationships. At the same time, when we do get engaged with a client, we really take the time to understand the culture of the organization as much as we take time to understand the role, the particular role, the leadership, with the skills and attributes necessary to be successful. What are the KPIs that are going to be measured for this particular executive coming on board? We kind of synthesize all that data, and then we go to market and identify particular candidates. And again, you're going to find lots of people who have the skill sets. There are a lot of great sales executives out there who can drive growth. There are a lot of great marketing executives. But it's coupling that with the cultural nuances that will make people work within an organization. You're unlikely to take somebody from a 25-year legacy media company and drop them into a startup. It's probably not going to work for a variety of cultural reasons and workplace reasons. So you've got to understand the nuances there. And I think that's one of the things that we do well in terms of, and our placements stick, and we think that is an indication of the fact that we understand both sides of the equation. On the other side of the equation, this is my particular space in particular, the media sector is transforming hourly. Unfortunately, it's been decimated with layoffs and positions being cut back. But what's happening is they're re-engineering their businesses. So there's still opportunities. It's just they're shifting into other divisions, and they're changing their employee base. So we've got to pay attention to that. We've got to advise our clients what we're seeing in the marketplace. We're working with both the legacy media companies as well as kind of early stage companies, as well as startups and others who are trying to, the Overtimes of the world, who are trying to disrupt the legacy media business. So again, it's understanding the entire ecosystem and figuring out what is the right fit there and how we can bring value to that. And at the end of the day, it's about knowing both the sector as well as the candidates in the marketplace.
Right. So one follow-up question there. When a firm approaches you, Len, Turnkey, with the prospective retained search, right, remit, which is what you guys, it's your stock and trade, how aggressively, or that's probably not the right term, how intelligently, better word, do you and Len interview the prospective, in your case, client to go into the marketplace to find?
Oh, it's significant. It's a significant and deep conversation in terms of intake, understanding where their head's at on the role. We then provide feedback on what we're seeing in the marketplace. If the marketing organizations of professional sports teams are changing, where they were previously brand marketers, CMOs were brand marketers, and now it's shifting more to data and analytics and fan engagement metrics. You've got to understand that and know how you're going to evolve that and the types of candidates you're going to go after. So if we're seeing successful companies out there who have adopted these new strategies, and our client comes to us and says, I want to seek this type of marketing executive, we're willing to push back and challenge that thinking if we believe that it's not what's happening in the marketplace. And that's why, again, some clients are, bring it on, let's hear it, we want to hear it. Some clients are a little bit more challenging, and they push back a little bit, and they think that they have a particular candidate in mind or a particular profile in mind. And our job is to kind of challenge that status quo, arrive at a right decision, and then go to market. We don't do the hire. Our client makes the ultimate hire. We provide optionality, and we'll go out and look and find those particular candidates that they believe they want for this role. But we'll also give them that optionality to say, hey, think about this kind of candidate or this kind of candidate on the other side of the spectrum. And if they have that choice, it helps arrive at the right decision.
That's super interesting to me, and I think our audience as well, because you are actually playing a consulting role along with your vast network in the marketplace to serve up the right list of candidates, the optionality, as you say. But when you are interacting with and collaborating with a buyer, in this case, I love the fact that you're willing, and you actually need to. And that's one of the reasons they hire Turnkey, is because of your broad, deep knowledge of the marketplace in a really up-to-the-minute scenario, right? And you had mentioned data metrics, engagement metrics, the whole data story, and the reality is, in the supply chain, if you will, of the entire 360 media approach, from distribution to advertising to sponsorship to insights, analytics, engagement metrics, getting the right data story once a hire is made seems to me to be so important in today's marketplace.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. Again, I think we're headed, you can measure everything today, and I think that's what needs to happen. I mean, again, we are looking at different roles, whether it's sales executives or marketing executives or data and analytics or technology roles. We really need to understand how an organization is evolving, but also what's happening outside their four walls, right? And bring our knowledge to them. And again, to your point, we do act as a consultant in that way. We're willing to challenge. We're willing to push back. And I think one of the areas that we have seen that has changed dramatically over the last several years is the marketing function, and how marketers today are much more data driven than they were even 3-4 years ago. And that's creating a whole shift in how organizations are looking at their own marketing departments and how they're reorganizing. And that's not only professional sports teams or the college landscape, it also is on the media side, where as you shift to the streaming world, you need to measure all this, and you need to drive subscription, and you need to retain clients, and you need to reduce churn. So you really got to get into that kind of growth marketing objective and hire a whole different type of candidate than you might have had in a linear world where you're just promoting spots and dots and promo messages and tune-in messages to drive linear television. Now it's about understanding where this consumer is, how to reach them across a broad spectrum of outlets, and then aggregate that to tell a story. And when you the Super Bowl this year was 51% of the audience was on linear, 49% was across streaming platforms.
That's amazing.
Almost 18.6%, I think it was on Tubi. This is the first year it was on Tubi.
Right.
So this is happening at such an accelerated pace that personnel needs to change to adapt to it. And that's why I think we bring such value to our clients, as we understand what's happening in this market. And it's not just Turnkey. We have partners in the Susherman Group under Turnkey, under the ZRG banner. So we have a whole separate media function that has a consulting arm that helps organizations like Warner Brothers Discovery and Univision and others build their marketing teams or go to market strategies to deal with streaming platforms and growth.
Well, yes, love to hear that. But we really can't have this discussion around data and data metrics and streaming and fragmentation without addressing, in many instances, what is viewed as the elephant in the room, because it's vastly misunderstood, and it's the early days of AI, right? So from your perspective, from Turnkey's perspective, what is it from your point of view? Where's it going? And then any of the early days use cases you might have for media, brands, teams, leagues, rights holders, but most importantly, audiences and fans. Because without audiences and fans, there is no media landscape.
Yeah, no, listen, AI, it's so fascinating, and it's evolving so quickly. We're using it in different ways. We're going to be, from a ZRG perspective, ZRG is now with 600 managing directors worldwide. We're the seventh largest and fastest growing executive search firm out there. AI is a core component of what we're building in 2025 and how we go to market, and how we research candidates, how we work with our clients. From a sports perspective, we're seeing AI deployed in a lot of different areas, whether it's dynamic pricing, whether it's scouting, whether it's highlighting player injuries before they happen. I mean, there's a whole host of specific AI-related functions and tools and applications that are being developed as we speak. It's just a rapid advancement, very, very quickly. So we are seeing that happen. From a recruiter standpoint, listen, we're still figuring it out and trying to figure out what the best tools are to use, how we can best use it. At the end of the day, you still need that one-to-one connection. You need to talk to someone. You need to look across the screen or in person to understand, again, those nuances of will someone work in an organization culturally. You could scan a resume in and pull out 10, 20 candidates. That's easy to do today, but you can't make sure, that doesn't ensure that they will fit within a culture of an organization. And even assessment tools that you use never guarantees that. So you have to do your homework with references. You have to do your homework with checking on candidates. It's a whole process, and it is a black box. To your point, there's no question there is this black box, but there's a lot of work that goes into that black box, that happens inside that black box, to identify the best candidates. But AI will definitely be a tool we will use. There might be some recruiters that push back against it. I think the recruiters that use AI will be in much better position than those that don't.
Right. Let me ask you a provocative question, at least it is for me. With all the tools you just mentioned about sourcing, referencing, obviously a growing number of tools for you to be able to suss out the right list of candidates that you might present to a client. As you go through that process, I have an opinion on this, but I want yours. How important is the one-on-one physical space interview, engagement, maybe more than one interview by you and your team to go through this list of candidates? That's question one. The provocative part is, if you have a bias going in based on all of the research and using all of the tools you just described, and it's a negative bias, or let's just say it's a neutral, trending negative bias, does that individual candidate have the opportunity to change your mind in that one-on-one interview process?
Yeah, I think one-on-one interviews are crucial. There's no question. And again, what video conferencing has allowed us to do, and COVID accelerated this, actually has allowed us to do a much better job of seeing someone and their mannerisms and their communication skills, and that's helped us, right? At the same time, I do think AI still is not completely vetted in terms of bias, and there have been several studies and papers that there are bias included in some of these AI models. So we don't just look at that. We do the deep dive research. We do the conversations. We have multiple conversations. Before a candidate gets in front of a client, we probably will have had 3-hour conversations with candidates before a candidate sits in front of a client. And then when we present our final slate, or when our candidates get in front of the clients, usually it's 3 to 4 maybe, who will make a final round interview. And in most of those cases, we suggest in person, because again, there's nothing better than sitting over a lunch or a dinner to have a conversation with a prospective candidate to see if they're going to be really fit, not only from a skill set, but then from that cultural kind of personal connection as well with a manager or with colleagues.
Well, that's a very encouraging perspective. And for our audience out there and anyone who might be listening to this, understanding the executive recruiting process and the importance of face-to-face in the same room, over lunch, over dinner, in a conference room, perhaps all of the above over the course of a cycle, is super important. And every individual should take heart with that, because it's not just an AI search or a bunch of online tools that, rise as candidates to the top. I'm super pleased to hear that approach.
Yeah, and Carl, the other thing I'd say is that a lot of firms out there still they put together a book or PDF document of 10 to 12 candidates and send it over and say, you're the candidate. We actually have a kind of, Moneyball approach where we break down the skills and attributes and rank candidates based on those skills and attributes, coupled with various assessments, coupled with written, perspective, and then interviewer insight. So it's a full 360 approach, and not just dumping resumes across, an email. And again, that getting that deep with candidates is really what's going to create a long-lasting placement, which is what we want to see. We want to see long-lasting placements. We want to see placements who get promoted over time. That's the success story, and that's really something that we put a lot of effort into, and see that our numbers, justify that.
That's very thoughtful and a very professional approach. It's also got a human side to it that is very important, and I love hearing all of that. Listen, I'm going to switch gears a little bit here. With your 35 years in this industry, I'm going to ask you to put your sort of crystal ball lens on here a little bit. The next 10 years could be, I will say, the most transitional period for our industry ever, as all of the technologies mature and new ones, come out of coding garages, if you will. But in the United States, over the next 10 years, we are hosting 3 of the largest international events / tournaments / games that the world actually has. 2 Olympic Games, LA 28 and Salt Lake City 2034, and the World Cup in 2026. Those tent poles are super significant, but they also are going to be crucibles, if you will, for this maturing technology world that you are right in the center of. So what do you see I mean, obviously, to try to go 10 years out as fast as our collective tech worlds are changing is a pipe dream. You can't do it. But you can go out 3 years or even 4 years, right? So you got 2026 World Cup and 2028 LA. What's on the horizon, and what do you see as the key milestones or benchmarks or elements in the continuing expansion and refinement of the space?
Listen, I think at the end of the day, you need people to operate all those major events at the venues, leading the organizations. You've already seen LA 2028 have numerous executive changes leading, and we're still 3 years out, right? Apple and MLS just made a decision. 2026 is fast approaching. FIFA, the world soccer eyes, football eyes will be on us. And Apple and MLS made the decision at the start of the season this year to not go exclusive with Apple and to move to Xfinity and DirecTV as well. And in addition, and I think that decision was guided on the fact that they want to expose the MLS to a much broader audience leading into 2026 so that they can grow the soccer game in the U.S. as well. So I think MLS and Commissioner Garber are looking at that monumental moment to say, hey, maybe we need to broaden our lens here. And they opened up the aperture, and now also on Saturday nights, they created a Saturday Night Soccer package, which all 25 million Apple subscribers will get access to. So I think Don is looking at it and saying, okay, the world's coming here. It's going to be. We want to expose the MLS to that as well. So I think that's one of the things that's going to happen. As far as the Olympics go, I mean, again, the technology will continue to evolve. CTO positions, technology positions, AI, these are all going to be driven by technologists, right? So us getting deeper there, and that's why we are part of ZRG now globally. We've expanded our practice, Turnkey's practice specifically in EMEA with George Williams, who leads our London office across Europe and Middle East and Africa, and Troy DeHaas, who leads our office in Asia Pacific. So we've expanded globally as well. In addition, ZRG has a huge technology practice, a huge marketing practice, and we are continuing to build out that and support our efforts in sports. So when we look at technology roles, we're understanding what's happening with security, AI, technology, crypto. Has crypto going to play a role in these games? Will crypto be accepted as payment systems? We have all that covered through our parent company ZRG and the resources that they bring to that and the lines of business that they operate in to understand candidates in those worlds. So if LA 2028 is looking for a crypto expert, we can bring that to the table as part of Turnkey ZRG and ZRG together.
Right.
And I think that's where you're going to see this workforce change dramatically over the next 10 years. It's going to be in technology.
Yep, I completely agree. And it's interesting to me, so interesting in LA, just tick off these three venues that each of which will play some role in the execution of the LA 28 games. Crypto.com Arena, the Intuit Dome, and SoFi Stadium, all named by technology companies. Mm-hmm. Now, they operate in different components, right? SoFi's an online bank, Crypto.com, the leading cryptocurrency out there or platform, and Intuit, which is 100% technology all day, every day. So it's so interesting to me to watch what's coming over the next, call it 4 years, and how the refinement and the maturing of certain tech sectors plays a more significant role, and then the emerging ones, which nobody maybe thought of, are now all of a sudden in 12 months front and center in the same way that ChatGPT was, right? Yeah. So fun to watch and fun to look out, and I very much appreciate your perspective. In the few minutes we have left, Rick, we ask each of our guests the same three questions. Yep. We call them the hot list, right? So here you go. The first one. What's your favorite mistake? A little bit of an oxymoron. Nobody likes to admit what their mistakes are, but we all make them. And so your favorite one is the one where you sort of messed up big time, but recovered from it and learned from it, and then the things you took away from that moment.
Yeah, so I I don't love to make mistakes, but I have learned a lot from those mistakes. And I think the first most important thing is acknowledging you've made a mistake. And too often I've seen executives kind of hide from that and blame others or not take accountability. And that's something that I learned early on, was to take accountability. And Peter Bavasi was somebody who really taught me that lesson. I left work early one night. I was a manager at Sports Ticker, and I left early one night, and I let someone else be responsible for a project that I was to complete, and I didn't complete it. Came back the next morning. There was a note on my desk from Peter, and it said, "You screwed up. This didn't get done. You left early. Had you been here, you would have completed it." And then he finished it with, and unfortunately I had the note in my office, and he finished it with, "And I know you're more than capable, and I know I know how upset you must be about this." And that just struck me right in my heart. And I was like, all right, I will never disappoint this man again. I will never make this mistake. I will always take accountability for it, but I will always see these projects through to the end. And to this day, I will not leave something before it's done. And that was a lesson that was learned in 1988. So it has stuck with me for many, many years.
That's a huge one. Great guidance. Okay, everybody write that down, because taking accountability and completing projects that you've been assigned and or you've taken on your own initiative, it's the results that matter, right? And the way you get there. Good one. Second question. This is kind of the fun one. The favorite live concert you ever attended, live show, that featured a female artist or a female-led band?
So, I first of all three of these women are badass rockers. I saw Pat Benatar November 22nd, 1980. I was a high school senior. No, I had graduated. I was a freshman at Fordham. Saw Pat Benatar. Just blew me away. I've been going to her concerts for the last, a long time.
As long as she's still playing concerts,
Yes,
right?
A long time. And she still kicks ass. She's amazing. I saw her 2 years ago here at Parks Casino outside of where I live outside of Princeton. She still kicks ass. Another one I saw in 1989 or 90, Melissa Etheridge. She could rock. Saw her on Broadway with my son. Going to see her in April again in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. She continues to rock. And then the final one, Pink is just the most incredible performer, songwriter, vocalist, aerialist, acrobat, just a mother. You see the way she, deals with her children. She and Carrie Hart met at the X Games in Philadelphia in 2001. So we were kind of, some of us working at ESPN were witness to that, the first go around, and she just continues to rock. I love all three of those women. My first concert was actually a female artist. I was 12 years old. I was in love with Olivia Newton-John. My mother took me to see Olivia Newton-John at Lincoln Center. Don't tell anybody, right?
Okay, yeah. Don't tell anybody. That's awesome. That's a great list. By the way, Pink, without question, the most gifted athlete that is also an entertainer with an awesome voice and the ability to do what she does and still belt it out while she's doing that is
incredible,
off the chart.
Incredible.
Unbelievable. Great calls. Last one, words matter. We talked a little bit about what you learned from great bosses and sort of what you learned not to do from not so good bosses. So not only do words matter, but oftentimes it's as important what you don't say as what you do say, right? So your favorite word and why?
Integrity. I mean, integrity is my favorite word. It just speaks to who you are as a person. Do people trust what you say? Are you going to deliver on what you said you would deliver? Again, not only do your bosses want to know you can deliver, but the people that work with you, the people that work for you, they want to be able to trust you. They want to know you're going to go to bat for them, that you're not going to leave them hanging high and dry, that you're there to help. So I think across the board, the word integrity to me, and again, I've had incredible bosses. Kevin Conroy at Univision was somebody that had tremendous integrity. He would push back constantly. He would fight for his people. George Bodenheimer, tremendous integrity. Again, never saw him say a bad word about anybody. Tough negotiations with commissioners and league presidents. I mean, he would never lose his cool and always did the right thing. Integrity means something. Say what you're going to do and mean it.
Well, that's right. And it's evident, Rick, that would have been your favorite word based on the last 40 minutes of this episode. It's been such a pleasure to have you. Cannot thank you enough for being a guest today on the Best Boss Ever podcast.
Thanks, Carl. I really enjoyed it.